that's sort of been my focus recently, is just like being a thoughtful consumer so I can be a better creative.
I like it.
I like that. I like that.
If I die tomorrow, I hope you hear these words. I ain't here to flip no birds or sip no serve. Hope the future generations can get this urge. Stay woke, youngin', and avenge these nerds.
What's going on, guys? We have another episode of Nerds of the Round. It is your boy Tone from across the hall.
It's your boy Sebastian.
And it's your boy Law.
And tonight we have the crew of the You Free podcast. We have Aazim and Eric. Their podcast, their mission is to create a communal space for individuals from different backgrounds to discuss their experiences, share opinions, ask questions, connect with others, and build the foundation for future collaborations. I feel like we are all on the same level because we're definitely trying to do that in our universe. But welcome to the show, guys. Glad to have you on tonight.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Like you said, I feel like we're cut from similar cloth. So it's
yes,
100%.
Yeah. So tell us about yourselves. What's the origin story? What's your origin story for the You Free podcast? How'd you guys get to know each other? How did it all come together? What was that conversation like? And deciding, hey, we want to jump in and start talking to people.
So where can I start? Eric Wilson here, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. Been interested in the audio space, I would say, since high school. I had my own radio show with another friend called The Jump Off 2. We were we were live in Concord, New Hampshire, because I went to boarding school out there, St. Paul School. Shout out to all my boarding school people. But yeah, just got in love with the audio space from there. And through one of my good friends that I met in high school, he went to Columbia and was friends with Aazim. And me and Aazim just connected there and just always just kept that relationship going.
Yeah, building off that. So what's up, everyone? I'm Aazim. Y'all might recognize me. I've been on previous Nerds of the Round episodes.
Oh yeah,
Yes, sir.
But yeah, like Eric said, well, first off, I'm Aazim. So I'm from Massachusetts originally. Like Eric said, I met him college days through a mutual friend when I was in Columbia, New York. So my first few memories of Eric are him crashing at the dorm.
Most good memories come from that.
Good memories.
Great memories.
So
I mean, that was my first intro to Eric. And then, in terms of like the You Free connection, I don't even remember the first conversation I had with Eric about it, but really I feel like it just sort of started from having conversations with like a ton of our friends and everyone just being like, I wish I had a podcast, but I just don't really like have time for a podcast, or like I don't really know where to begin. And so from that, like I'd had plenty of conversations with homies about that, and Eric had conversations, and I think just sort of really organically, like both of us saw that, we were both interested. Unlike Eric, I don't have a background in radio, and for a while I didn't really feel comfortable in front of the mic. So for me, it was more so just like, how can I create a platform that puts a spotlight on like the other friends that I have who like, I feel like everyone who I know, like I feel like they have something to contribute to a conversation. So how do we create some sort of a platform, that allowed them to kind of speak their truths, right? And it just sort of organically grew from there. There's a lot of iterations before we made You Free public.
Yeah.
But yes, that's sort of the
So how far does this go back? Like how many years more or less? Like if you guys put a date to it, like no, for us it's like maybe 2 or 3 years for nerds. Like what would you guys put it at for you guys?
I mean, we launched November of 2018, but I would say that we were in talks for like a year or so. We were in that phase where it was like you're just consistently and always just planning, and it's like you're making every excuse not to just press record. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, we gotta get the name down. Okay, we gotta make sure we get all the websites right. We have to make sure we have all the topics we're going to talk about. But then eventually it was just like, hey, let's just press record, try to get these practice rounds in, and actually just see what happens. And funny thing too, we were always just trying to come up with like a format for the show, and like knowing when to press record, and also how we best should wrap it up. So our first episode that the first one that we actually recorded completely, even before we threw in some practice rounds, like right around 30 minutes or so, Aazim's mic just cut out and he just lost connection. And I ended up just like asking a question, and like I repeated it again and kind of just like let it flow. And then when we replayed it back, we were like, oh shit, 30 minutes, that seemed like a pretty decent time. ending it on a note where people would want to find out more information or want to continue the conversation was another high note. Let's kind of just rock with this and see where it takes us. So it kind of just happened by accident too.
So it's a
I'm
happy accident.
yeah, I was gonna say happy accidents.
Yeah, straight up. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So like listening to some of your episodes, like I noticed, I remember when Azim told me about your podcast. And so I started listening. And the first thing I was like, you guys got a song on for about a minute and a half. And then like after the song bleeds into the conversation. There isn't like really an intro. You start hearing the person talk and then you're kind of like hooked. And then as you're listening to the conversation and they're talking, you don't have like an organic close. It also kind of just fades out because you guys are talking about the structure of the podcast. So was that also done on purpose for what you want to do? Also, you guys introducing yourselves like 10 minutes into because I always notice that as if be like, we've been having this really great conversation, but we haven't even introduced ourselves, right? So
100%.
Yeah, I mean the way that so like Eric mentioned, like I think originally we kind of just naturally like stumbled into that as a format because we didn't really have a concrete intro or outro for the first one that we recorded. And also just to give you a timeline about the, that aspect of it, like I remember the first one that we recorded and kind of the impetus to actually like launch it was after Mac Miller had died. So like the first conversation and, one day we'll just figure this out with the world. But that was the first like conversation that we ever recorded was, in the aftermath of Mac Miller dying. So then, all of that was fresh in my mind. And as I was editing it and I just had this sort of free flowing conversation, to work with. And so I just threw a Mac Miller song at the intro and then had it fade into the conversation and then did it with the outro. And then, we probably did maybe like 10 to 15 practice sessions before we actually released, public facing. And I think just using that as a starting point and trying it a few other times, we're like, okay, this just like, is different than what other people are doing, but it doesn't feel like there isn't an entry point. It's like, it still feels like
exactly
press play and like, get a sense of what the conversation is. I mean, like Tone mentioned, like we'll have conversations where literally 25 minutes into the 35-minute episode, it's like, oh shit, we didn't actually do intros. Like we should probably let people know. But it's like, that's just the nature of the conversation. Like we just get so into what we're actually talking about and like the actual topic itself that after a while it's like, oh, this is a podcast, by the way. And then we just go to the conversation. So for me, it's like that's what I love about it is it just like feels very like, it almost feels like you're like walking down, the hallway and you just hear some people in like this room, like, or like in the cafeteria at the lunch table, just sort of like chopping it up. And you're like, oh, I wonder what they're talking about. And then you kind of like inch your way over and then you just fall into the conversation. And then slowly like the conversation keeps going and you just like fade out of it. That's sort of how I see it.
I like what you guys have done with also each episode's description, which something that really stuck out to me was that you guys capture quotes. And one of my favorite quotes was actually from you, and it was people are going to find different versions of the answers for themselves, which I thought was a really dope quote. And I like that you guys
I said that.
Yeah, you said that.
See, that's what I'm saying.
Nuggets.
Well, what made you guys decide to capture quotes from the interview and put it there? Because I think that's very powerful in the description.
Yeah, I think there was kind of two pieces to it. The first is like when we first started doing this, our goal was to be as like unorthodox and unconventional as possible, to the point where we actually tried some things that we then had to like move back on. So for instance, like when we first dropped, we literally, our first season, we dropped 3 episodes a week because we were like, oh, it's half an hour, like we'll just get it out there. And that was a terrible idea. But it was like us overthinking, like, how do we do things differently? So in terms of the quotes, it was like, all right, like everyone always lists out, today we're joined by this person. And like, just sort of the general, boxes that everyone checks for description. So we were like, all right, how do we kind of approach this with a little bit of a different way? And I think the other thing, which, speaks to like the general mission behind U-Free, is that we don't, like, everyone is quotable. Like everyone has, an opinion, everyone has like something to offer to the conversation. And so in the same way that you would see like a quote from like, a famous celebrity or like a famous historical figure, like we feel like your friends are quotable. Like everyone we've had on is quotable in that way too. So that was the other addition to it, is to be like, you may not know this person, but chances are they still said something dope. And like that can be used as an intro to who that person is,
I want to ask this, like, because again, pointing out that you guys have also started with YouTube with this segment called You Think. How's been that transition from going from audio to like also video with YouTube and all that? And do you guys see a difference with the shows and everything?
I would say with a lot of our audio content, the way we want a lot of the material to be timeless, because we realize that you can talk to someone and discuss, for example, I don't know, what's something that happened in pop culture recently, like, or not even recently, months ago, like Kanye running for president. Yeah, or even WandaVision, right? But it's
Right.
like, and it's like a year and a half from now, it's like if you do listen back, all these conversations just become so dated, but we also realize that the people that we're speaking to and the energy that they bring to the table is timeless. So it's like, how can we avoid and really get to the root of what actually connects us all? Whether we come from just different places in the world, whether we have different educational backgrounds, there's something that fundamentally ties us all together. There's things that we all just think about on a daily basis. So keeping the conversation on that with the audio, but then it's like, okay, there's also a lot of shit that's happening in the world that we need to discuss too. And how best can we sort of condense that in a space that's not sort of in this audio realm, because we also do realize that video content is important. And how can we sort of mix the best of both worlds? And that's how we came up with You Think. And I think that's just come and go with the whole like you free element, you know, having those free flowing conversations, You Think having reflections based on anything that's happened in the world. I think that we were able to sort of merge both of those worlds together.
And piggybacking off that a little bit, two things that come to mind. First off, I'd say like I want to give, huge props and kudos and thank you to Eric, because Eric was someone who really saw the vision for incorporating video before I did. Because for me, like the audio component of like popping on a call with the homies was a really big component of what we did. So it was like, well, how do we bring in a video aspect to it that doesn't take away from what we know is working in audio? And like that's everything from like, what does that logistically look like when we edit it down? And like, what does that mean for when people, like there's something to be said, Eric talks about this a lot, there's something to be said about like when someone is asked to come on for a phone call interview or conversation versus a video, like even just like, being conscious of what you're looking like and like all these things, how that can influence the conversation. So I was very strongly like, I really feel like this podcast in its best iteration, You Free specifically is an audio, is an audio product. But at the same time, like people, we were getting feedback even from people from the community itself who were like, we need some video content. Like we need, it took a while for us to really like crack what that case would be. And then, like the other thing too is, as I mentioned, like I'm someone who is not that, I'm still growing comfortable being in front of the mic and being in front of the camera. So for me, for a long time, it was like, well, if we're going to hop on and like do a video thing, how do we make sure it's clear that we're not positioning ourselves as like thought leaders or experts, but more so like, these are our perspectives. We're asking questions. Like, we're not here to give you an answers. We're just here to like share the questions that we're having. And I feel like that, like once we just sort of, we actually ideated around a completely different version of You Think that we like did maybe 6-7 practice episodes on. And we were like, this is not it. Like, we're just doing too much. And we just sort of, stripped it back down to a very raw, just like, what are some topics that happened this week? Let's just hop on. You share your perspective and what you're thinking. I'll share what I'm thinking, and just like constantly framing, like, we don't have the answers, but we're trying to figure this shit out too. And I feel like it's great yin and yang with the timeless and audio only nature of the episodes.
Yeah, and I was saying the beautiful thing about it too is what we begin to realize is we're able to do a lot of just different callbacks from the audio episodes and things that different members of the community have spoken about, and just really seeing everything come full circle whenever we do discuss like a current event or a topic. What's also pretty cool too is like some of the members of the community, they'll pop in and sort of leave comments and sort of add their own little sauce as we're discussing, which just adds so much more flavor, and we're definitely grateful for that.
We started as an in-person podcast, and obviously we desperately would love to be in person every once in a while, but that transition to remote was a little bit rough because we lost in our first early on, we lost like two solid episodes because we didn't use Zoom at that. We were using Skype, and Skype was just god awful. So we eventually got like the groove and got comfortable again. And that's why we do the lives and we do this. But the one great thing about going remote is that your reach to people just expanded.
I have to say, yeah, the reality is that, we've been able to reach out to more people through doing it remotely. And one of the things I love about your guys' podcast is, again, I'm going to take a quote from one of your guests, Manzier, which is, I still want to be here so badly to be a part of a solution to work towards the America that I want and the America that I identify as. And I feel like you guys' podcast also represents that slice of life of America that we don't see because of the diversity in your guests. You guys have guests from all types of background, and what was that like? What was some of the challenges you faced in getting guests to come on? How did you overcome that? And again, what are some of the challenges that you guys have faced that helped influence this podcast and being that voice?
Yeah, I mean, well, first off, I appreciate you calling out that quote, and that's definitely something that I think we've been more and more conscious of, just as like political events and we all see what's going on in this country. We all know what's good. You know what I'm saying? So there's no way that even if we aren't, even if the U-Free episodes aren't necessarily reacting to what's going on a week by week basis, like there's definitely going to be themes, about just like social progress and just like all of these topics. And our goal really there too is to be global as much as possible. So far, we've only had a few conversations with folks outside of the country, and that's something that I really would like us to continue to do moving forward. Like right now, it still feels like we're centered in America, and like it's consciously, at least in our mind, that like ultimately we do want to be as global as possible, and like we're still getting global perspectives because people are immigrants from different areas and things like that, but at the same time, like we're not trying to operate like America is the end all be all, in these conversations.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in general, like it just kind of comes back to the idea of like, we also recognize that in addition to like non-famous or non-celebrity voices not getting a ton of play, in the podcast space, like that's in general, like minority voices, just like we know that there aren't, as many opportunities for minority voices to be heard, especially if you're not famous or not like, a creative or like whatever. So that's like, even when we first started the podcast, I think from the jump, it was just like, how do we have as many diverse voices as possible?
The whole idea is really to tap into the humanity that connects us all, so it's like aside from the materialism things, aside from all of us complaining about work, what do we actually like ponder and think about at night or whenever it's like those late summer nights by a campfire when everyone really gets into their feelings as the night is winding down. There's also just like certain themes and conversations that almost 9 out of 10 times come up. And it's just like reflections on the world, reflections on society. And as Zim always used to tell me, it's like being able to reflect on what the world is, what it could be, and what it should be. And I feel like that's also like the thread that ties this through. And it's like, even when we think about even the name of the website, ufree.earth, I think it's like we're already thinking globally, so it's not like having a regular .com, because like we're not a company. I wouldn't consider us a company whatsoever, but it's like we're really trying to push forth and be the voice of the people,